Well, all right. Good morning. I think we'll get started. Welcome to the Colorado Grain Chain's Homeschool webinar series. My name is Dan Waldvogel. I'm the membership coordinator with the Rocky Mountain Farmers Union. Thank you for joining us today. I think we'll get started just with a little housekeeping to begin with. Um, uh, Folks that are on the webinar, you can communicate using the chat function. But also the best way to ask a question is by clicking on the Q&A section and asking that question. That way we can kind of keep track of them. We'll try to get to questions as much as possible, but that way we can kind of keep it in line and make sure we can try to get to everyone. Before we get to the main content, I'll also mention too that these videos will be there. We are recording and they'll be available afterwards. If you are a Colorado Grain Chain member, you can see recipes, notes, and presentations in the Grain Lesson Planning Google Drive folder, and that is linked on the password protected members only page on the Colorado Grain Chain website. So that's coloradograinchain.com. Otherwise, non-members do have access to the YouTube replay to be able to rewatch the webinar. But without further ado, let me introduce grain growers Demetria and Bryce Stephens. They operate a family farm in the Central High Plains. They'll be discussing how they grow wheat and the lessons that they've learned. So thank you to the two of you for joining us, and I'll hand it on over.
Okay. So, hello everybody. I'm Demetria, and thank you to the Colorado Grain Chain for inviting me and my dad to speak today. And I'm going to be talking just about some very basic information for identifying different types of grain and maybe a little bit about soil and water needs. And then I have a presentation, some pictures, because it's not very easy to walk out in the field with a good Wi-Fi connection. But I have some pictures of growing turkey red wheat. That's the main crop that we grow on my farm. And it's kind of a year in the life. So you can see all the different stages that you couldn't easily see just if we walked out in the field today, you would see some growing wheat, but you'll see maybe some extra steps. So here in front of me, I have a bunch of seeds that we've collected over the years and a few different soils that we've collected from different areas. So to start out with, if you go around the United States or just anywhere in the world, there's going to be different kinds of soil types, different growing conditions, and those can affect the kinds of crops that you can raise. So this one is red, and this soil you'll find in Oklahoma quite a bit. It's kind of a clay soil. This soil is sand. It's from the sandhills in Nebraska. This one is from our field. So this is a silty clay loam, and it's kind of a grayish when it's dry. It can get darker, even black when it's wet. Here's some white dirt that's kind of like a chalk that you find in some hillsides. And here's some topsoil humus. It's darker, and this is something that you'd maybe want to try to strive for with whatever you do with growing crops. And yellow is kind of another chalk that you might find. And then underground, we collected some sugar sand when there was a well that was kind of being repaired. And then here's kind of another soil type in our area called lusk. It's kind of a little bit more of a lighter, almost yellow color. But those different soil types can grow some crops better than others. The type of grain that grows really well in our area is wheat. So we raise turkey red, hard red winter wheat, and this is what it looked like last year. It's a the scientific name is called Triticum stabum, and it's the result of about 10,000 years of growing crops in the Mediterranean kind of area south of there into Turkey. And its parents were actually emmer, einkorn, and a wild kind of crop that we think of as goat grass. So it is what they call holeless. So it doesn't have an outer shell. They also call that pre-threshing. So when you harvest it, it doesn't keep its shell on, and that's a fibrous material that people can't really digest as well as the grain that you mill. So we also have some emmer here that does have the hole on it, and it is this one was grown in Nebraska, so it's something that's very old, but you can still grow this kind of crop today. And to be able to eat it, it's dehulled. So we also have some einkorn here that has been dehulled. But to be able to plant it, you would want the hole on. When they dehull it, they may be removing some of the germ that helps the plant. That's where the sprout comes from. And there's other types of hulled grains that we still grow and eat today. Some of those are oats. They have kind of maybe a single spikelet. Emmer has maybe 3 spikelets or so, kind of thing sticking out. Or maybe not, maybe it's less than that. But it has more of a shape like this, where emmer is kind of splayed out a little bit. And then barley is another hulled crop that you have to dehull it. There are varieties of barley and oats that don't have any holes. They've been bred to remove those. So you can find those and grow them, and you don't need any special equipment to remove the hole to be able to eat it. So those are some very important staple foods that you can kind of grow in our area. Another one is corn, and a lot of the food corn is white. There are, of course, blue corns, sweet corns, green corns. Most of what farmers raise in the United States is a yellow corn, and maybe a lot of it goes to feed, but a lot of the things that we eat probably have corn in it, and it's probably yellow corn. And another interesting one is buckwheat. It's not, I guess, technically a grain crop. They call it a pseudo-grain or pseudo-cereal, and maybe it's more closely related to rhubarb than wheat, but they call it buckwheat, and you can mill it and make noodles or pancakes or other things, and it also has a hole on it, so you'd probably want to dehull it to have kind of a lighter flavor. Within wheat, there are 6 classes, and those different classes of wheat have different textures or flavors. So we could probably get into those at some point, but I think I'll maybe take a little bit of time for if there's anyone who has immediate questions. Otherwise, we'll go into my presentation for just what actually happens with turkey red in a year.
Great. Yeah, we don't have any direct questions coming in yet, so I think maybe we can move forward and see how they roll in.
Okay. So then we can pull up my presentation, and I think Kim's gonna do that, and I'll just talk as she walks through them. So I think they sent out a kind of a handout ahead of this call that showed the growing cycle of turkey red. And the first thing that I think about is a crop rotation. So here's a picture of all of our fields, and they're terraced. Those are the lines. And thinking about a crop rotation, you're thinking about multiple years of growing different crops and how those crops affect the fertility of your fields. You don't want to grow the same species on a piece of land every year because you're more likely to have issues with pests, weeds, and diseases. Maybe you could get away with it 1 year, but just over time you'll notice more differences. And without putting other nutrients back into the soil, then those crops are taking things out of the soil. So next. The things that we do for fertility is having alfalfa in our crop rotation. That adds nitrogen to the soil, and we rotate that with wheat and other things in a long multi-year cycle, because alfalfa takes multiple years to get established, and then eventually you rotate out of it into other things. We also use animal fertilizers, so manures, either dry or as a spray, and other kinds of plants and minerals that we find on our farm. That's all part of our fertility. Next. So we prepare the soil for planting, and we use what are called grain drills to put the seed into the ground. And after about a week or so, the seed starts to sprout in the ground. Next. And wheat is very forgiving. So you can put it in the soil, and it will, it just needs a little bit of moisture, and it'll just send up shoots. So then it starts to get established in the fall as a hard red winter wheat we plant around September 15th. That's for our specific area. And it has to go through a freeze period to develop seed later on. So actually getting covered with snow is a good thing. You want to have kind of insulation over winter because a very cold wind, like some of the polar vortexes we've had in the last few years, could cause winter kill. So if there's bare soil, we've also had that, a lack of snow some years, that can really hurt the wheat. So next. Then after the soil starts to warm up in the springtime, it starts to send new leaves and kind of stool out. Looking for the next. And the picture on the left was taken last month. So this is the 2020 crop. Then that I dug up the roots kind of just to see where they're at. And I don't think I got all the roots, but you can see over winter it put on a lot of roots and started putting on a lot of leaves. In about a couple weeks, we will start to see jointing, and right above the joint, it's like your joint, there will be a little seed head. So that's the next picture, and it shows just a very tiny little seed head, and then on the right you see the seed head out of the stems of plants with a thing called a flag leaf. That's the very last leaf, and that's where a lot of the nutrients for the plant are collected through photosynthesis. So next. And there's a lot of variety in turkey red that you'll see in the heads. This is different stages of ripening. Next. And you can tell just by looking at the outer part of the heads when the crop is pretty much ready, when the heads start to nod, they start to curve over a little bit, and you can rub a head between your hands, blow away the chaff, and crunch a seed between your jaw. And if it cracks, that's probably ripe in the field. Next. If you're growing just a small little plot in your garden, you can cut a shock of wheat before it's ripe and let it ripen in that shock, and eventually you'll be able to thresh it that way too. We're able to cut straight cut into the wheat when it's at the right moisture, because this is such a good area to grow wheat. Some areas they have to swap the crop ahead of time and then pick it up later after it's dried, or there are some areas that they use different desiccants or herbicides to dry down the crop. That's maybe used very little, but that does happen because the conditions aren't right in the field for you to straight cut it. So next. So we drive through the wheat in the field with the combines, and next, put it into trucks, next, and bring it back to our bins, next. And this is one of the last trucks that we loaded it from a crop here a couple years ago, next. Then we save a lot of the material from the field. We don't want a lot of the grain to be on the ground. We want it to be in the bin. So there could be a lot of extra material in the bin that sometimes is called trash. So that's on the left with the white caps, the green material, and we use separating equipment, seed cleaners, to get the wheat separated from the chaff. So then on the right, we bag the wheat, the clean wheat. Next. So we put it into different sizes of bags. These are about 30 pounds. Next. Or tote bags. Those are about 1,200 pounds. Next. And we make some of the crop into things that we eat ourselves. So last fall we used the growing wheat and made wheatgrass out of it. And it did taste quite like grass, but it's probably a nutritious thing. And we also mill some of the grain and make our own bread. So next. So that's one of the loaves of bread that we made. And that one actually looks like a wheat kernel. It has kind of the crease in it. Next. And so then the cycle kind of starts again. And it's about an over a year of growing from the time that you plan, where you're going to plant it, preparing the soil, fertilizing, the time you harvest and are able to bake. So it's quite a long process to grow hard breadwinter wheat, but you can plant one seed and get at least 20 to 100 seeds from that single plant, from that single seed. So it can be a rewarding process. And you don't have to have a lot of land to just try it. You could put it in a little pot and grow it for your cats. The cats like to eat cat grass. So I would encourage anyone to just put some seeds into the soil and put a little water on it, and you can grow something and even just look at it and enjoy it. So that's what I wanted to let you all know today.
Great. Do you want to jump to a few questions?
Yep.
Demetria? Okay. All right. Well, just a little bit more curiosity about the farm itself. Just kind of asking about your scale and how big were some of those lots that you rotate, and then just asking as far as the map goes, the styrations were related to soil type rather than typography was the question.
Okay. Do you want to answer that, Dad, or do you want me to?
Go ahead, Demetria, and I'll fill in if needed.
Okay. So our area that we own is 880 acres. Half of that is pasture, half is cropland. We raise about 200 acres of wheat every year, and we have part of that will be fallow. The other main thing that we grow is alfalfa and a few other hay crops and grain crops. So the terraced areas that were yellow at the beginning of my slideshow, that was about 200 acres, roughly.
Great. Yeah, and along that same line from Eleanor, kind of the same questions too, was just to clarify that you were able to straight cut, and then she was also asking, rotating time if it takes a year or so, kind of how you work in your rotations.
Mm-hmm. So yes, we straight cut the wheat because it can be 12 moisture or below, usually in a typical year. That's good moisture for storing long-term in a bin without having to use air or other kinds of methods to get it to the right storing temperature and moisture. And then once again, the other question on rotation. So alfalfa, we try to leave in the field for up to 7 years. And so that particular field would be out of other crops for 7 years. Then when we take it out of alfalfa, we go into wheat for maybe 3 or 4 years. So that's wheat, and then we have a year of fallow, where it's just stubble, maybe some wild plants come up. We try to conserve moisture and not have bare soil. Then we go back into wheat after a year of fallow, then wheat, then fallow, and then we would go into maybe another crop or back into alfalfa.
Okay, great. And then, yeah, just a little bit too of curiosity on just the whole history of turkey red as well. Just kind of a question asking, how the heck did it make its way all the way from the Black Sea region to Kansas? And I'm sure that's a big answer, but
Yes.
Just some curiosity there.
Yes, and people have asked me to speak on that before, so I do have very long videos on YouTube about that, but just very briefly, it has such a rich history going back to, you can trace it back to the regions in Turkey. Eventually, it went into Crimea. Immigrants from the German area, Germany, moved to the Ukraine, Crimea, under Catherine the Great's time. And when it became clear that they were going to have to go into military service, they immigrated to the United States, and they brought a lot of seed with them. They switched people in Kansas from growing some soft wheats that maybe weren't growing very well here to hard red winter wheats, and that grew better. And then some, I think people with the USDA or seed kind of explorers brought larger quantities of grain of hard red winter wheats back to the United States. And they named them Turkey Red kind of when they were in the United States. Back then, it probably wasn't called Turkey Red. It was probably called winter wheat, or the places that they got it in Crimea, like Krimka, or some people just call it Crimea type wheat in some of the historical documents.
Oh, great. Yeah, Michelle was asking if there are any, is there a resource that you know of that kind of lists which wheats are winter varieties and which, if any, are spring varieties?
So some of those historical documents from the USDA show those varieties. There are a lot of modern varieties that you can actually trace back to Turkey Red and some of these other kind of original grains. But in general, I guess some of our friends in Colorado have been collecting and raising in trials these different ones. So I actually have some of those here. So like a Pasayton, I'm probably not saying that quite right, but this one is a hard white winter wheat as far as I can tell, because it has kind of a uh, glossy light color, and the white wheat doesn't have a thing called tannin that makes bitterness and also a red color in the bran. So a red wheat, it does have more of the red color to it. Durum is the hardest of the wheats, and so if you crunch it between your teeth, be probably the hardest. The soft wheats, yeah, if you crunch it between your teeth, it's going to be softer. So a type of soft white wheat is Sonora. A type of hard white wheat is Snow White, and that's another one that we grow on my farm. It was developed by a Kansan, and they actually mixed a red wheat with some other white wheat to get something that was adapted to our growing conditions. And then there's hard red spring wheats, and I think that would be like Rouge de Bordeaux or Red Fife. I've heard they can go both spring and winter, but I think they do better in spring conditions.
Great. And yeah, Richard was asking just a little bit more about production methods. His question was, what percentage of Colorado wheat farmers use herbicides such as glyphosate to dry the wheat? I know you guys are just on the other side of the border, so maybe it's kind of in your region of the Central High Plains. Is that a common practice, or how much do you see that?
I think people in the Central High Plains, and that would include Eastern Colorado, would not need to do that. We're just such a dry area, dry and hot during the summer months, that probably people don't need to do that. I know just in my county, maybe 4 years ago, people were being advised to desiccate because of weeds that were in the wheat. There was really a thick weed year, and so people were trying to dry down the weeds more than the wheat to be able to cut it. We don't do any of that personally ourselves because of certifications that we maintain. If you get into more the northern plains, that's where you'll see more of the desiccation, and probably more into Canada, especially with oats.
Sure, great. And yeah, Michelle was asking, about turkey red and other uses. Is it best used for bread, or are there other baked goods that it's good to use for?
So wheat is called common bread wheat because it's mainly used for bread, and that would be hard red winter wheat, especially. The white wheats also can be made into good bread. Durum, you would want to probably use for noodles. The turkey red does really well for bread. We've tried to do noodles, and it kind of falls apart a little bit, but I have some friends who make really good turkey red noodles, and we've just tried all kinds of different things. My sister makes beer that's really good, and she's made it with the white wheat and the red wheat, and we do notice a little difference.
Oh.
Maybe the white wheat is a little sweeter. and the red is a little bit more richer or nuttier. I'm not sure. People, and another thing is every year is different. So when you have specialty kind of farms raising a crop every year, you're not getting a blended wheat. It's not blended for uniformity. So you'll get the characteristics of that farm in that year. And that could be differences in protein level, flavor, texture, the milling, the amount of milled grain you could get from a single batch of the kernels. So more than just variety, farms will have variations and years will have variations.
Oh, awesome. We've had a couple questions come in just as far as household use, homesteading, folks that are gardening, kind of what does it take to, as far as, yeah, what size plot of wheat do you need to kind of get to that scale of economy that's worth the time? And then do you have any other tips as far as, maybe harvesting by hand and shocking the crop and anything else as far as just basic homesteading and gardening uses for growing wheat?
Mm-hmm. Yes. So for someone who's in a city who has maybe a backyard garden, you may be able to make a pie or two from just your backyard, but it's not something that you'd easily be able to supply your own grain for your household year round. You would probably need, like, if you had an acre of wheat, you could hope to get 20 bushels. So times 60 pounds is 120, 100, no.
1,200, yes.
1,200 pounds. Yeah. So then each loaf of bread is a pound, maybe. So you could do 1,200 loaves of bread, maybe. That's a way to think about it.
Okay.
So that would be enough for more than a year for a single person.
Great. Yeah.
But you want to have a crop rotation too. So.
Sure.
Yeah.
And then also, yeah, there were a couple questions as far as, are there pests that folks should watch out for? And then also there was a question about, are hulless varieties more susceptible to disease, such like that?
So the main pest that people are concerned about in my area is, well, it's actually a disease, rust. It's a fungus that grows on the leaves and that can affect yield. We don't really have any bug pests. Like the main one would probably be Hessian fly, and we are able to avoid that just by our planting date. That's why people in this area plant around September 15th. It's because at one time there was Hessian fly that it thrives in warm conditions. If you wait until September 15th, it could probably freeze. Another one is a pest that lives in the stem of wheat. That has had infestations in certain parts of the Central Plains, especially probably the panhandle of Nebraska. I forget what that's called, but it's a pest that's in the stem of the crop. Most of the pests and diseases you'll find with wetter areas. So funguses thrive really with wetter conditions than we have.
And then
there is another pest. It's called the grasshopper.
Oh yeah.
Grasshopper plague can ruin a wheat crop, but there's a way to stop that from happening, and that's by having borders around your fields and giving grasshoppers something else to eat besides your wheat, or having some kind of critter there that'll eat grasshoppers. So ducks and chickens and geese, if you have enough of them, at least you can keep them out of your garden. Runner ducks work well against grasshoppers because they can go fast and they like to eat grasshoppers.
And then you can
Great. Yeah, following up on that too, just kind of asking about any unique challenges to, growing with organic certification, and then along that line too with pests and weed control, how close do you plant? Do you set your grain drill when you're planting turkey red to help with, things like weed control?
We usually plant at one bushel at 60 pounds to each acre, and each bushel has about 1 million seeds. So you can figure there's 1 million seeds on an acre, and then it yields anywhere from 20 to 50 bushels, depending on how much rainfall you get and how good your soil fertility is. So that should answer that. What was the other part of the question?
weed control.
Weeds, I don't have a weed problem. If weeds come up, the turkey red grows tall. You'll notice the picture with Demetria. She had a yardstick there, and it was above the yardstick. So I've seen 5 foot tall turkey red in excellent soil conditions. And all you have to do is flip the head top, and the growth of the plant will suppress weeds.
And also proper seedbed preparation.
Right. There are weeds that rob moisture. One of them is a wild oat called cheat. And right now I'm in the field because there is some cheat that just happens naturally. And I'm getting it early in the spring so that it doesn't seed out. And then it'll come back when I plant the wheat. It'll be infested in the wheat. So I'm actually reducing the seed bank of cheatgrass. I like to have a wild seed bank rather than trying to sterilize my soil with chemicals because I can use all of the, quote, weeds. It's just hay for my bison and my cattle. I raise cattle, and I raise clover and alfalfa and some sorghum crops, cane, and then I take every weed I can get and put it in a stack because it's just a smorgasbord for our livestock. It's nutrition. Different weeds have different nutritional values, so I just stack them.
Great. Well, thank you for that. And I guess, there's some questions as far as just related to the supply chain as well. You grow, harvest, and package your wheat. Kind of who's next in the chain?
Mm-hmm.
Do you typically sell more to larger customers or bulk buyers? Do you have relationships with annual contracts, or is it more specific? And feel free to limit anything too as far as proprietary stuff, but just kind of curious as kind of how the food chain itself, the supply chain works. Are you selling directly to retailers or bakers, or kind of where does that wheat go after it leaves your farm?
I think I would prefer to have as close a relationship as I can to the person who's going to actually eat the stuff. So a lot of people don't have their own mill at this point. They need a little more storage, but we do sell a lot to bakers that are now milling. So that's a recent thing that has helped us be able to sell more directly to people. We used to sell semi-loads to processors, and then it would go to a bagging system, and then distribution to retail, and then eventually you'd get it at your house. So I think there's fewer steps now. There's more infrastructure that's being built, and we're working towards that just in general. And we aren't quite there yet. We have just a mix of different outlets that we're going to. Sometimes it's shipping those tote bags across the country. Sometimes it's delivering ourselves when it's close enough. So the Colorado Front Range, we think that's close enough that we can deliver ourselves and have more of a direct connection to the people who are actually eating it. So no contracts, it's just relationship building and spot markets.
A little history on the marketing of Turkey Red. When I first reinstituted it as a growing variety on this farm, there was no, and it was certification through organic. The buyers were organic processors, and they all rejected Turkey Red because it didn't fit their idea of what was a good wheat. They wanted the modern varieties. I continued to grow the Turkey Red simply because I liked it, and I just dumped it in the elevator. So one of the backup plans is the local co-op. I can take it to town and sell it if there's no market for it. And I did that for several years. And then the interest started in the uniqueness of the heritage grains and the flavor and the taste and the artisan bakers. The whole infrastructure of that was being rebuilt, and we started to feed into it. So I've seen a big change, and I would still grow Turkey Red, even though there's no market in the organic industry for it. Simply because, and there is no market in the conventional industry. They just throw it all in the same pit and put it on a train, and it goes for export mostly, or animal feed. So the whole system, I've seen a shift in time, and I would continue to grow Turkey Red because it's what's the proper kind of grain to grow here in the high plains. I don't need to empower the seed breeders who come out with a new variety every year because it's superior. I think that the superior one is the older ones. Anything that's old is probably superior because you take humans and they start tweaking with the genes, and then it loses its nutrition, loses its vitality, it loses its flavor. So I'm just going to grow the Turkey Red because I can feed it to my chickens. It makes my chicken pop around a lot more, for one thing. And the bison, they will munch on it. And even though, well, we feed a little bit of grain in the wintertime to the bison just to keep them happy, I guess.
Yeah, I think, and you kind of answered the question, but also there was one just kind of, I don't know if you want to pontificate anymore as far as like kind of the main obstacles of these type of wheats being produced on large scale, similar to blended wheat. How can these wheat strands scale without just becoming kind of another monoculture in one way or the other?
I've thought about these big farms that have, I know some farmers that have 80,000 acres or 9,000 acres. They don't want to get into the Turkey Red because it'll only yield well, it can yield 50, but the average is about 15 to 20. And so they're looking for dollars. How's this go now?
They're paid on yield, so they are
paid on yield. And so when you breed for yield, you lose some of the things that are unique about Turkey Red as far as flavor and, I don't know, some kind of power in there that gives you the, what's the French word? Terroir.
Terroir.
Terroir. Yeah, whatever. It comes from the land. So the Turkey Red comes from the land, and if you just grow thousands of acres, you're going to have the same problems that the conventional farmers, the chemical farmers have, which is disease. And right now we don't see any disease in our wheat because we do stringent crop rotation. We give the wheat its unique plot of prepared land to thrive in, and then we just don't go for volume and dollars. It's priced according to however the demand is.
Quality.
Quality. Yeah, it's a quality item rather than a bulk commodity item. So bulk commodity farmers, they have to figure it out for themselves how to get in there and play this game.
Sure, absolutely. Well, we do have some other questions, but I want to make sure we reserve some more time. If there's anything else you want to share, Demetria or Bryce, as far as presenting or anything, or
I think there was those maps.
yeah, great.
Yeah, put the maps up. I'll talk a little bit about maps. Okay. This comes from kind of a educational anthropology perspective. Number one over there is a map of the 1851 treaty with the Cheyenne. It was at Fort Laramie, and it's just a country map. It's in the treaty itself. These are the boundaries, and on the left side is the continental divide. You've got the North Platte River, and then the 100th meridian goes south down to the Arkansas River, and the Arkansas River west back up to the continental divide. That's the area that we live in, and within which is Denver Metro. So, number two, High Plains ecoregion map. This is from the ecology perspective. We are in the High Plains. There are the northern plains and the southern plains. There's something distinct about the central High Plains. The central High Plains goes from the foothills, Denver, Boulder, over to about the 100th meridian. And that's where this wheat grows best. It's more similar to some places that are elsewhere in the world as good certain variety wheat growing regions. We'll get to that later. The third map is not a map, it's a logo of organic producers in our area. The big arc on the top is the Platte River. South arc is the Arkansas River. The red dot over to the left is the Denver area. And all those little stars is a group of farmers in this area that, well, there actually was some farmers in Colorado region. They have jumped certifier and went to a different certifier. But the one we're with, this is the area, it's Northwest Kansas. And that's our limited liability company, and we call ourselves Midwest Organic Producers. We raise cattle and wheat. And then, in my opinion, this is the Colorado grain chain, all those maps and ecoregions. And it's similar to the Pampas in Argentina, or the, correct me if I'm wrong, Zhongwan Central Plain. Is that right, Demetria?
Yeah.
Okay, it's southwest of Beijing. It's similar, flat ground, raises wheat. The Pannonian Plain in Hungary, India, the Punjab, Indus, Ganja region, it's a wheat growing region. Russia, the Pontic Caspian steppe, that's where this Mennonite growing region was, and they got it from Turkey, the Anatolian Plain. And then there is another smaller flat ground in South Africa. It's called the High Veld. And they raise wheat down there, but it's further south. And they do have some good wheat coming out of South Africa. There is one, oh well, the Australia. the Nullarbor Plain, the outback. It's kind of a desert region, sort of like western Kansas, eastern Colorado. And you could call it semi-arid, which is near desert because of low rainfall. So we have an area where a drought-tolerant grain like Turkey Red does very well, and it has good, different flavor. And if people can appreciate that, then I say use it. What I say is get some seeds, plant them, eat it, and save some seeds and grow it again. And that's how you become self-reliant. Anybody can do it.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much. We have a few more minutes for some questions, so I'll just get to a few others. There were some questions around if you could enlighten us any more on equipment for processing, storing, cleaning, milling. If there's, what can be done on farm or other facilities, and then also if you were aware of any stone ground millers that are in Kansas or Colorado.
What I've done is buy old equipment. It's called low maintenance, something, low input, sustainable ag. I go to farm sales and I buy junk that's going to be crushed, made into iron to sell to China. So I buy it real cheap, and it's better built. It just needs a little fixing, maybe some tires, or I just have a reserve stash of grain drills and old tractors and old combines. You've got to kind of work at this and try to get the low tech thing. You could start out with a scythe. That's a piece of equipment that chops off the wheat stalk, and then a piece of string you tie it up in a bundle, and then you take a stick and you beat it until the heads give off the grain, and you flip it up in the air. I mean, we have all that equipment here too for demonstration purposes, and practice it once in a while just for the fun of it. But it takes a long time to process grain that way. We got the stuff that was probably in 1940s and 1950s. It's old iron, and it's very rugged and doesn't need much care, minimal maintenance. And for cleaning, we got some things at a farm sale. It's a rotary screen. It does a partial job, and then for a better cleaning, we bought an industrial scale from the 1920s called the Hart Carter. It's built in Canada. It's what the grain cleaning facilities used in big time. Now they got much bigger equipment that costs a lot. I bought that on a internet auction for a few bucks, and we replaced the motor, and it runs just fine, and it cleans very well. And we have some other smaller old type seed cleaning machines. We can run it through there and finish clean, and then bag. So planting, harvesting, tillage. I've got a line of equipment sitting out there that I bought for $5 at the farm sales, and I can pick whatever I need to go out in the field and do whatever kind of tillage operation I need. So it's a thing that happened over time. I built this up because I had these crazy ideas about not going in debt and buying a combine for I forget how much they cost nowadays.
$250,000.
$250,000 to start out. You can add on features. Have a robot combine out there will cut your field.
Yeah, it can add up real quick for sure. I think we have time just for one more question, so I'll just kind of combine it. Dina was asking kind of what was your first season for growing turkey red, and then just a tiny bit more information about growing it. Just are there germination and water requirements kind of throughout the season? What is the water requirements kind of look like for producing turkey red for you?
The first season, I remember as a very young child, my grandfather had a full-time combine. He was cutting his own turkey red. He just called it turkey. It was what everybody grew here. They hadn't had the new modern varieties yet. Well, later on, as I was growing up, they came up with some new varieties. One of them was called Wichita wheat. It was derived from turkey red, but they had a problem. It would all fall on the ground when it got ripe. So you had to be out there and cut it before it was ripe. Otherwise, it'd all fall on the ground. It'd shatter. And so it was a madness. Happened during harvest where people would cut grain that was a little bit green. Then they had problems with storage. Well, they kept improving and improving. So I've seen the go around that you have with modern improvements, and I just went back to the old variety because I found a grower nearby that had sourced from some Mennonites in south central Kansas the seed because he wanted to start growing it again, and I got it from him. And it was back in the early 1990s that I started growing this turkey red here on this farm. What was the other part of the question?
Just kind of about water requirements throughout the season. So what do you need, at the beginning for germination, but then, kind of what are those requirements? When are those critical times to get water on the ground, and how much does it require?
The critical time would be at planting to have some moisture so the seed can germinate. But you can plant it in the dust and just hope for a little bit of snow and a warm-up period in the winter where the snow will melt and it'll germinate and then go dormant. So it don't take very much to start the wheat seed from growing.
We're all dry land. I forgot to mention that. We don't have irrigation capability. So there's things you can do to prepare the soil so that there is moisture there. You have to think about that when you're preparing the soil too, if you're dry land. But if you have just dig in the soil and you can see or feel moisture, that's probably enough for the seed to start to sprout.
Yeah, there's a way of farming that the Chinese do, for example. They can raise food in the desert because they use rocks. And the little bit of rain they get, they put rocks over the top to hold the moisture in. Well, in the following tradition here is that you use the kind of tillage equipment that makes little clods. So you have a clod bed above the soil, holds the moisture from evapotranspiration, which is evaporation into the atmosphere, and then you'll have a little bit of moisture there, especially if you live in a rainfall area that's like 12 inches a year. That's all you get. And most of it comes in the winter with snow, or like further west, you're down to 7 or even less. There is a way to conserve that moisture enough to grow wheat because it comes from a drought. It's bred for dry conditions. That's what the Ukraine and Crimea, the big blackland soils up there above the what is that big pond over there? What is it?
Black Sea?
The Black Sea, north of the Black Sea. It's a dry area, and they know how to do it there, and the Mennonites knew how to do it, and they knew how to do it when they got here to Kansas, because it reminded them of home. So we just take from what the other people have done, the seed and the growing conditions, adapted it to our region, and then go forward. I think you can do it anywhere. Just have to learn from, like standing on the shoulders of your ancestors.
Well, that's great. And just really want to thank you both, Demetria and Bryce, for sharing everything with us today and giving us a little bit of a window onto your operation. And just so grateful for your time. So thank you so much for joining us. And then also just to follow up, for Colorado Grain Chain members, you can access this through the password protected members only page. If you're not a Grain Chain member, you can still access this video through YouTube replay. But it doesn't matter who you are, if you're a consumer or a baker or brewer, distiller, miller, or a farmer like you guys. There's a place for you in the Colorado Grain Chain. So thank you for joining us, and until the next time, take care of yourselves. So thank you again.
You're welcome.